Hello. My question is about contrast.
She's going to adjust that microphone just a little bit.
I've lived a lot of contrast, and I've witnessed more to those very close to me. And I know I've been stockpiling my vortex with the contrast that I've lived, but have I also been stockpiling the vortex with the contrast that I've witnessed that has caused me some, or I've allowed it to cause me pain?
We want to clarify something at the beginning of this conversation. When you use the word contrast, you seem to be talking about unwanted things. And when we use the word contrast, we mean variety from which to choose. And well, it can be all of that. In other words, in this variety are unwanted things, which help you to clarify the wanted things. If we could convince you that in that contrast and in that knowing what you don't want, that there is a spark that is lit, there is a rocket that shoots from you of what is wanted, and that is a powerful, important, magnificent, delicious, sought after by source and by you gift. But most people, as you're talking about contrast, are not seeing the gift that comes from it, because you're stuck in the contrast. And even the way you began your conversation here, it's sort of like contrast. Yeah, there's this bad stuff that's happening, and this bad stuff that's happening, yeah, I get it, that it puts stuff in my vortex, but this bad stuff that's happening. And we want you to understand that you've got the emphasis in the wrong place in all of this. If you could see contrast as the clarifying variety from which your desire is born, it's where we began today. If we can convince you that the desire that's born, that fresh desire that is born, is a wonderful manifestation, and that if you would focus upon it, then you would experience the full realization of all of that, then you would start blessing every bit of contrast that gave birth to every bit of that allowed all of that. Are you following?
Yes.
So talk to us about some of this contrast. In other words,
the health condition of family members close to me.
All right.
Yeah.
So give us more.
Feeling helpless about their condition and not able to assist or contribute.
Well, you are helpless about their condition. You are helpless about their condition because you are not the creator of their reality. And so, but when you feel helpless, that feeling of help, so how does that feeling of helplessness feel? Well, it feels helpless, Abraham. But is it an emotion that feels good? Of course not. Is it disempowering? Of course it is. Does it suck the life out of me? Yes. Does it mess up my moment? Yes.
Guilt. Guilt is a huge feeling I have, witnessing their demise or their decline, but I don't have that issue, and I feel guilt for that at times.
Well, we think you should feel guilty. You should get as sick as they are.
Ridiculous, I know. Completely ridiculous.
What we want you to feel with us is that, so as you see something that you can't change because you are not the creator of their reality, there is something that you can change, and that's the way you feel. So, and you've been there, because even when someone else is suffering, or even when someone else is afraid, or even when someone else is living something unwanted, you have the ability to focus in a way that you don't feel that way. You can distract yourself, or you can even find a peace with whatever it is. And you could actually feel your heart begin to sing again. because that's natural. And in fact, you do that. You do it all the time. And then you feel guilty because it doesn't feel right to you that your heart should sing when someone else is suffering or when someone else is temporarily lost from the vibration of well-being. And we've been saying, and it sounds frivolous in this vernacular, but we've been saying you can't get sick enough to help sick people get well, and you can't get poor enough to help poor people become prosperous, and you can't become confused enough to bring clarity to others, and on and on. In other words, when we appeal to your logic, you know that. But what it really comes down to is you can't help anyone unless you are fully aligned with this energy of your source. And you can't be fully aligned with the energy of your source when you are feeling sorrow, when you're feeling sadness, or when you're feeling guilt. So what is it about you humans? It's so interesting. We love you so much, but you are so willing to deprive yourself of the fullness of who you are. And in this case, you're telling us because others are doing it. Others have deprived themselves of the fullness of who they are. And so I just don't think it's right for me to be the fullness of who I am. And we say, thank goodness Source doesn't do that. In other words, the only reason you could ever feel negative emotion is because you've chosen a vibration that the Source within you doesn't choose. If the Source within you would choose that same negative, full of resistance vibration, you wouldn't feel any separation. Have you ever had a conversation with someone where you're high and they're low in terms of vibration? They feel crummy and you feel high, and the longer you talk with them, it's like, all right, what's going to happen here? Are you coming up or am I coming down? Because one or the other is going to happen here if we're going to insist on hanging around together, because it's just a natural process in the desire to communicate. And so you hold your ground, they hold their ground, and there was a sort of a stalemate, and then they hit one of your buttons and down you come. Now you're communicating. And we say, on what level do you want to communicate? And what you're saying is, I feel guilty when I stay up here. I feel guilty. And we say, well, if you can maintain that, one of two things will happen. They'll come up there with you, or they'll gravitate out of your experience. And you say, and if they gravitate out of my experience, then I'll feel more guilt. And we say, you got to get your act together. You got to decide who you are. Who are you? Are you Source energy in a physical body? Are you? Are you Source energy in a physical body? Then why would you put up with these emotions that don't feel like that? And we say you do it out of practice, you do it out of habit, you do it because most of it you can stand. In other words, you can stand most negative emotions because they don't take you to your knees. Most negative emotion is tolerable. You're used to feeling ornery, and you're used to feeling overwhelmed, and you're used to being angry. You're just used to it, and so you put up with it. And so you hang around in those vibrations, even though it's a huge deprivation of who you are, because you could be soaring, and you could be floating, and you could be laughing, and you could be feeling joy. You could be and should be feeling all of those wonderful things. And why for a moment you put up with any of that other stuff? It's only because you've been trained with a lot of others who have been putting up with that other stuff. Until finally you come to a place sometimes where there's really something that you care about that you can't control through any behavior, and you've got no choice, if it is your desire to feel good, other than to find a way of feeling good anyway. And when you do, you turn a vibrational corner where you finally find alignment with who you really are, and then everything that doesn't match that has to fall away from your experience, you see.
So you just look away.
You look or feel, again with the eyes, again with the looking, again with the eyeing. Again, in other words, you feel for it. You feel for it. So we just have some really straightforward questions to ask of you. Do you enjoy the feeling of guilt?
No. Good God, no.
So describe it to us just a little bit. It's sucky. It's life depriving. It's empty.
Completely.
So
it's a stone in the bottom of my stomach. It's just weighing me down completely.
So when we say let it go, make peace with it. In other words, if we say to you, that negative emotion, and it sort of sounded like that for a little bit, the negative emotion that you've been allowing yourself to feel, all of you, more than you mean to, more than you want to, is not a bad thing. It's a contrasting thing. It's a contrasting thing. And when you feel guilt, what desire is born? Can you feel just for a minute, when, even in the middle of a feeling of guilt, what's the feeling that's born? Feel just a freshness of a desire. Feel it, feel the rocket just whoosh out of you just for a minute. Feel it. What does it feel like?
Relief, lightness.
Relief. All right. Relief's a really good word. So relief is relief, lightness. What else?
Happy.
All right. So relief is the strongest word. Lightness, happy. Now, as you spoke that, did you feel any of it? Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just as you spoke it, did you feel it? In other words, out of the guilt came that desire for that, and for just a minute, did you feel it? So when you say, so I look away, we say, yeah, look away from the guilt and look toward the relief and look toward the lightness and look toward the happy. Just feel for it and just try to feel it just a little. Do you feel it just a little? Do you feel it just a little? Isn't
Yes.
it something that you can conjure? Is there anything that happens on a day-to-day basis that makes you feel light?
Yes. Definitely.
Like?
I just have relapses.
That's all right. Like what?
There's
Like coming here. Did you like coming here?
A million things.
It's
coming here today. My dog, beautiful fall day, which is not today, but I mean, there's a million things that I look to, and then all of a sudden, it is around the corner.
But wait, so the point in the moment is to find the lightness of that. And the question that we want to put to you is it wrong to find the lightness when the heaviness potential is there? In other words, what value is there to anyone to go with the lower vibration? The source within you will not do that. As we were talking about you meeting a friend and you might bring them up or they might bring you down. Source is always that friend that's always up there. Source never comes down. Source is always up there. That's that lightness that you're reaching for. And once you get that squared away in your mind, once you realize that you have the ability to find the thought that produces the emotional response. You have the ability to do that. But until you decide that you're going to do that, as long as the criteria is anything else, as long as the criteria is empathy, as long as the criteria is understanding where another person is, as long as the criteria is not looking bad in the eyes of others, as long as there is any criteria that you are utilizing other than I want to resonate with the fullness of who I am because I want to feel good. I want to feel good because feeling good is who I naturally am. Until that is your dominant intent, then there are going to be a whole lot of wild goose chases that you're on, you see. It really just is that simple. And so it comes back around to what we were saying as we began here today, that the emotion is the manifestation. That lightness that you want to feel is the manifestation. And when you get it, you see, because hear this, if you think that focusing upon the family member who is sick, that of course if there was an immediate recovery, of course you would focus upon that recovery and you would feel better. Of course, when you see good feeling things, you feel good, and when you see bad feeling things, you feel bad. That is logical that would be. But if you feel dependent upon that situation changing before you allow yourself to feel good, that's the entrapment. That's that suffocating disallowing of who you are. That's really what's at the heart of this conversation. And when you discover that you have the ability to shift your emotion, which is what we are wanting to call your primary manifestation, when you show yourself that you can shift your emotion, you can't change what's going on with anybody else. You can't even control any circumstances right here, right now. But you can, within 10 minutes, we're not kidding you, find the manifestation of a better feeling emotion. And when you do that, then you have the world by the tail. Because once you show yourself that, then you're feeling good. And once you're feeling good, then the manifestations that you want to call real life manifestations begin to follow that. Every conversation that you have comes on the heels of what you're doing emotionally. It's just a fact. And when you make your emotion your primary manifestational goal, then you've got it. Then you've got a handle on everything. Practice it. Make a decision that you're going to shift emotion about something and find a way to shift the emotion, and then watch the series of events that take place. When we come back from segment of refreshment, we want to pick up sort of where we're leaving off here. because we want to talk about this business of achieving a vibrational, emotional manifestation. And then we want to talk about what's next. We want to show you how the vortex is the holder of all things that you want, but the vortex is the holder of the vibrational equivalent of them, and they still are going to flesh out for you in specifics. And if you could stop being so concerned about the specifics fleshing out to which you would then have an emotional response, and start focusing upon the emotional response that you have control over now, then you will begin to see how the fleshing out occurs after you achieve the emotional response. We've been saying vortex first, then manifestation. Now we're saying to you, manifestation of emotion first, and then more detailed manifestations following that. What we're showing you is how worlds are created. We're showing you how you are the creator of your own reality. We're showing you how to find the basis of your vibration from which everything else will follow. But if you start not at the basis, if you start out there in the specifics and you don't have control over the specifics, and you don't, then you'd never get what you want. You just complain about contrast your whole life. Good time for a segment of refreshment.